issues. Let's not get all emotional about it. Let's talk about the issues.
Right, exactly. I couldn't agree more. I just don't understand why you'll keep talking about the Bible and you'll say that, Satan was actually right or this was actually right, and then you'll say that it's all fake. Why do you even talk about the Bible at all?
Because the Bible disproves Christianity and Judaism. So the Bible disproves both religions.
Well, do you understand that that's your source? Do you see what I'm trying to say to you?
Well, so David, I want you to think about this. I am disproving the religion by the religious book that created it. So it disproves itself. You don't even have to study history or anything. All you got to do is study the Bible, and you can find out that the Bible is not true because it has contradictions all throughout it. So yes, it is okay for me to quote the Bible to say that the Bible is not true. You don't just quote the Bible if you think the Bible is true. You can quote the Bible if you're demonstrating that the Bible has contradictions and lies and evil.
And like I said, I'm just going to ask some questions, and maybe you can ask me some, which would be fine. I don't understand how there's so many people with so many pieces of paper that don't believe in Jesus, but they believe that he existed. I mean, I don't understand how you can honestly come to the conclusion that now listen, you don't have to believe him and all of that. I get it. But to say that he never existed.
Correct. So now let me respond to that. So I was a Christian for 30 years, and I believed that Christianity was true. I believed that Jesus was real. I believe he actually performed all the miracles and resurrected from the dead for 30 years, maybe 25 years, because I was definitely, fading out there toward the end somewhere.
Right. Yeah.
But the reason I concluded that Jesus didn't exist at all is because I found out that the New Testament stories about Jesus were written in Greek philosophy before Jesus ever existed. So Philo from Alexandria wrote, he interpreted the Old Testament, the Greek Septuagint, from Plato's perspective, from a Greek philosophical perspective, and he came up with this logos doctrine that said there was a logos of God. The logos means the word. That's a Greek word that means word. And it says that there was a word of God, which, which was the most ancient archangelic logos of God that was neither created or uncreated, but was the agent of creation. And he was the high priest of God. He was the manna from heaven. He was the mediator between God and man. So all the things that Jesus became in the 2nd century was what Philo of Alexandria wrote in the 1st century. And Philo lived in the early 1st century, and he was a Jew from Alexandria, Egypt. And he lived at the exact same time that Jesus was supposed to live. So I was like, oh my goodness, all they had to do, it's actually not even remotely possible that while Philo was writing his philosophy about the Logos of God was an archangel of God, a mediator between God and man, it's not even remotely possible that while he was alive and writing his philosophy, that his philosophy was literally playing out in Jerusalem right before his eyes. How could he be writing philosophy while Jesus was actually living it in reality in his religious center of the world? He was a Jew. He was well connected with Jerusalem. He didn't say a single word about Jesus. He didn't know that Jesus existed. He didn't write about Jesus at all because nobody wrote about Jesus in the early to mid 1st century or even the late 1st century. All the writings of Jesus were 2nd century by people who've never met him.
No, sir, that's not true.
It is true.
That is inaccurate about 2nd century Christian writings. That's not true.
It is true.
Well, I'm trying hard to understand.
Well, so David, let me give a little bit of why I say it is true. So, the scholars say that the earliest gospel was the Gospel of Mark, and they date it to around 70. But it's absolutely ridiculous to even think that that Mark was written in 70 because there was a war a significant war where millions of people died in the year 70. So nobody is writing a story about some miracle man who lived 40 years prior in the exact same year, especially Jews. There were no Jews that were writing about some miracle man. And when you realize that there's not a single prophecy predicting a Messiah, a Jewish Messiah, to come and die or be resurrected, that doesn't exist. There is no prophecy about a dying Messiah. So this tells you that whoever wrote this story about Jesus was not a Jew, but was an enemy of the Jews. And so the enemy of the Jews were the Romans, because they were the ones that were in a war with the Jews. The Jews thought that God would send a victorious military general to be their Messiah, an earthly human being who would actually lead a war against the Romans and free them or liberate them from Roman oppression. That's what the Jewish scriptures led the Jews to believe. But when the Romans destroyed the Jews, the Romans created a religion to replace Judaism, and Jesus was created by the Romans to mock the Jews and say, if you want to believe in a Messiah, you have to believe in this dead guy, because this dead guy who hung on a cross, he is your real Messiah. And if you don't believe in Jesus, the dead Messiah, then we are going to unalive you. We're going to throw you in Gehenna hellfire. So
do you think that a lot of Christians, a lot of Jesus followers, died for their faith?
No, they didn't.
Think about that. There wasn't Christian killings.
So correct. The Romans did not martyr Christians, because Christianity was centered in Rome. You even know it. The Catholic Church openly blasted from the rooftops that the church was always headquartered in Rome. It started with Peter as their first apostle or first pope, and then Clement of Rome was either the second or the fourth pope, depending on which church father you read. So they know, and Irenaeus in the 2nd century said all churches around the world should take their direction from the most ancient church started by Peter and Paul in Rome. So the Christian tradition always points to Rome. The headquarters for the church was in Rome.
So are you saying
bishops were appointed by the Roman Empire?
Are you saying that Peter was the first pope, so Peter existed?
No. But I don't think Peter existed. But in the story, in the narrative, so Peter is not even the pope in the Bible. The Catholic Church is just saying that Peter was a pope, but yet Paul actually was a much more prominent figure than Peter, even in the Bible. We don't know. The only thing we know about Peter is that he was a doofus. That's the only thing we know about Peter. He constantly stuck his foot in his mouth and he said stupid things, and Jesus called him Satan.